The first AI-built zero-day exploit was caught in the wild in May 2026 by Google. So AI is already developing these exploits, and these exploits are now running free in the wild.
You're really again seeing this gap shorten between the identification of vulnerabilities and to the actual applying the fixes, right?
This actually becomes an existential threat for the bug bounty hunters. A leader should be able to identify these trends and be ready for them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Great Cyber Podcast. My name is Aniket, and I have Dr. Bird with me. We are the hosts for this show. Dr. Bird, welcome to yet another episode.
Hey, Aniket. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure to having you guys on our journey and discussions around AI and cybersecurity and tech development. Welcome.
And today, we are here to talk about vulnerability management and patching. We are not going to look at what is vulnerability management and how to do patching. That's not the focus area today. Today's focus area is that until now, various organizations have had their own policies. Some organizations say, I will not install the latest patch. I will install a patch which is N-1, one version behind. Some other organizations, they say that if somebody reports a bug to me as a bug bounty hunter, I will take 90 days of time to develop a patch for this and then release it to the public. This 90-day framework and this N-1 policy that is there in the organizations or in the enterprises, we feel that because of the development of cloud mythos and new AI-developed exploitation mechanisms, these are going to be obsolete very soon, and organizations are at that cusp of realignment, where they will need to identify what can we change. What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Bird?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating discussion and evolution. I guess it was mid-June where we saw Anthropic's release around its capabilities to rapidly discover and exploit vulnerabilities. And that really, changed the scale and discussion around who patches first and how do we address some of these things. And as you articulated, there's a entire framework around software development, deployment, implementation, and AI, in essence, has changed that. One interesting conversation that you and I were having before the start of the podcast was the programs and the initiatives that corporations have around responsible disclosure and bug bounties, right? Where independent researchers or scientists could identify vulnerabilities that were critical for an organization, report that, and receive monetization, from that, right?
Yeah.
And with the capabilities of these foundational models, that just changes that whole dichotomy, right? Of responsible disclosure, bug bounty, because you can't necessarily wait for the N-1, the full testing and evaluation of in the sandbox, right? Understanding dependencies and workflows to see if there's an impact, on the enterprise, so to speak. We're really talking about business resiliency and continuity at its very essence.
So true. And they have to change. They have to look at what is the new way of doing it. Maybe can we prioritize the assets that are internet facing? Let that be on N. Everybody else can be on N-1. So there's a gradual change that they will need to do as an industry. And then go further from there.
Yep, that's a great approach.
Yeah, because recently the Reserve Bank of India and the CERT-IN, the Computer Emergency Response Team of India, they have also released a new circular where they talk about accelerated patching for internet-facing assets. They said if it's a critical vulnerability, the patching has to be done within 2 days. You can't wait for 90 days for that.
An interesting CISA, right, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, has done the same, right? They're saying, hey, we have to address in 2 or 3 days, right? These internet-facing systems, and they are taking this approach of informed prioritization and they're advancing this zero trust architecture that we've talked about in our courses quite a bit.
So true. And the ripple effect of this is going to be on the asset inventory, where every organization, if they are maintaining an asset inventory, they need to identify if this asset is internet facing or not.
Yes,
If they don't specify that, then how will you change the patching frequency for those assets?
exactly.
But here is an interesting twist on this. This actually becomes an existential threat for the bug bounty hunters, because so I'm a part of a WhatsApp group of a few hackers in India. It's called Hackers Galore, and yeah, hackers galore, they say. And these hackers, they keep posting screenshots of the bounties that get assigned to them or that awarded to them. Recently, somebody posted a bounty of $15,000 that they received because they found a critical bug in a really popular website. Now, these are the kind of people who are not working in a 9 to 5. They are running their own hacking business and earning good money sitting at home. And now they are going to face existential threat because AI is going to take away their ability and their opportunity window to identify these threats in advance.
Yep. And we see that, globally, right? Corporations, I shared in our initial discussion, Apple released some security updates. Yesterday, I was patching all of my iOS devices. And what you are
Good
seeing
at
is
that.
companies like that, right, not waiting to bundle them in a full iOS release, right? They
Yes.
are
Yes.
patching and issuing these updates as soon as they are able to determine that the software is stable. They're pushing the deployment out, to all of their users, right? And they're really trying to stay ahead of the public discovery of these vulnerabilities and the ability to exploit them, right? So
So
they are
true.
identifying it. They are developing solutions, mitigations, remediations, and pushing those out to their audience, to their customers.
Very true. Everyone, if you're listening to this and if you have an Apple device, learn from Dr. Bird and patch your devices. Not just you, your family as well.
Exactly. So you can imagine if you're an iOS Apple user in your home, how many devices you have, from your smartphones, your tablets, your watches,
Yeah.
all of those devices. It's quite interesting to have a house, everyone scrambling to update their devices at once, and the lag that it has on your network, right?
In a visual way, I can imagine all the apples shimmering with the updates.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. But then Apple has also set a good precedent because of this, that they did out of cycle patch release because they felt that the patching cycle cannot wait in this age of accelerated exploitation. Isn't that right?
Yep. You're really again seeing this gap shorten between the identification of vulnerabilities and to the actual applying the fixes, right? Now they can deploy fixes, like even on the in an enterprise level, they can release these, fixes, the patches, but it's up to the tech team to actually deploy and implement them, right? So that's
Yeah.
something that needs to be addressed as well. So again, we're talking about in a previous video some of the ways of thinking about AI and the speed in which the foundational models are shifting, not only from a national interest, but a business interest, the tools, the technology, and resources. When you're talking about resources, it's about informed prioritization, right?
Yeah.
Making sure
Yeah.
that you are addressing the issues that are most critical for your organization, right? From the lens of business resiliency and continuity, right? You want to stay safe of that.
Yeah, so true. And as you said, that continuity management is very important. The continuity also needs to be managed for the security and the timeline around security for one specific application or a server or an asset.
Yes,
Now, if the patching cycle is reducing, maybe the organizations can also take a look at runtime controls or segmentation, because of which you don't need to install that patch every time. You simply update your runtime controls so that it's a patch that is always getting updated consistently.
that's
So
great.
that's
I
one way to doing it.
Yep, I agree with you. as we talk about all the time, this is really shifting how
Hmm.
organizations think about the architecture of their organization, right?
Right.
Technology, the assets, the people, and moving towards the best implementation of the zero trust architecture, right?
So true. And that's where um, the first AI built 0-day exploit was caught in the wild in May 2026 by Google. So AI is already developing these exploits, and these exploits are now running free in the wild. And that's truly where vulnerability management is a topic which leads to patch management eventually. That has to be taken really seriously by the organizations performing these scans on a regular basis. I know some organizations, they proudly say, we do a monthly scan. In 1 month, we are going to run one scan, and in that, we find all the vulnerabilities. I wonder how these organizations are going to survive going further, because by the time they scan in the next month, the attackers would have updated their tactics, technologies, and their methods at least 20 times before that.
This is really, again, shifting this notion of how TechOps, operates, right? From the responsible disclosures and bug bounties and ultimate remediation, right? This is really a change in your technology strategy, governance, and resiliency, right? From that lens.
Very true. Very true. And perhaps for SMB segment, the small and medium business, who cannot afford an entire team for managing their IT and their cyber and their governance, perhaps an AI enabled tool can actually save them that money, can save them that expense of a person, and that AI enabled tool continues to scan. Because if you have smaller footprint, if you only have 50 computers, it's easier to manage with AI enabled scanning with a constant scan going on,
That's a
right?
great point. We often think about the lens of cyber from the large corporations and what organizations are doing, but most of the small and medium businesses, makes our national interest, right? The
Yeah.
shops, the stores in our communities are part of this larger supply chain and ecosystem. And of course, developing some methodology and policies and procedures around how they integrate some of these best practices are so important for their resiliency and continuity. And it trickles up. There's also some conversations around how to address some of the open source software. We often talk
Yes.
about the big, large tech companies, right? The Googles, the Microsofts, and Apples, right? The Android platforms, their ability to patch these their large architecture and framework. But what
Hmm.
about some of the open source tools and software that we all depend on, right,
Yeah.
to function?
That's true. Now, this is also where, as it is open source, it is also supported by that open source community of developers who
Yes,
continue to manage and develop the patches for this. But then, perhaps that open source community also needs an inclusion of AI, because in today's world, it cannot be a human against AI. It has to be AI against AI in order to really be competitive in this battle.
exactly. And we all know that we are, resource constrained, right? The cost and the use and tokenization associated with the use of some of these more sophisticated models is prohibitive, right? We have to monitor
Yes,
that from a management standpoint inside of organizations and universities. And, the challenge is how do we share some of that continuity across the open source community as well for our
absolutely.
smaller and medium size organizations.
Right, right. So, everyone who is listening, what has been your actionable takeaway from this podcast episode so far? If I were a CISO, I would immediately go and check my patching cycle. I would go and check my patching tool, see if they have any AI enablement or not. And are we able to really accelerate our timeline and start talking with the board of directors to, to get those approvals? Because it's not just one person's decision in the cybersecurity entire ecosystem. The CISO will need to put an approval to the tech committee who sits on a quarterly basis. If the tech committee approves it, then the patching cycle will change from the next quarter. So, all of these things take a lot of time in an enterprise. And that's why a leader cannot be surprised all the time. A leader should be able to identify these trends and be ready for them. Right, Dr. Bud?
That's a great point. Having those conversations with organizational leadership is so important. Maybe put together a slide deck of who patches first, right? And put that
Yeah,
as part of your business resiliency and continuity discussions, right? Highlighting the evolution of the foundational models using maybe Anthropic and Glasswing as an example. And then use
yeah,
any of the large tech companies, right? The Apple example or any of the Google examples, Microsoft, where the
yeah,
window and the turnaround time has, clearly been identified. Patch Tuesday, from the Microsoft perspective, has increased exponentially, right, with the release of the Glasswing project, the ability to identify and
yeah.
mitigate some of these vulnerabilities. So those are your kind of evidence-based discussion points around the importance of changing your organizational mindset around who patches first and how that is prioritized.
So true. And another point for discussion for a CISO is having a discussion with your vendors. If you are at a premium category of a customer for a specific vendor, could be Google, could be Microsoft, then usually you get access to the patches much before the general audience does. So even that has to be accelerated. So if there is a possibility of exploring that or expediting that, that's another discussion that the C-suite needs to have so that they can get faster access to the AI or the patches. And they also need to have a discussion with their vendors. Are you able to detect if there is an AI enabled model that is attacking my organization? I.e., can I detect if Claude Mythos is attacking me?
That's a great point. Again, part of those business and resiliency and continuity discussions have to include vendor management, cyber offense, cyber defense, and of
Hmm.
course, business continuity. Those are, your three kind of capability discussion points and takeaways for your
Yeah,
discussions with your leadership and your
so
vendors.
true. So true. The world keeps changing, right? It keeps changing on the daily basis, Dr. Bird.
Yes, it does. It's really an interesting, exciting time to be part of the technology landscape.
And as you were telling me before the show started, that from a chilly winter, now it's a heat wave coming towards United States, right?
Yeah, exactly. We were talking about that earlier. Just in Europe, we were watching some of the news stories around the impact of the heat wave there.
Yeah,
In the U.S., we're feeling a shift between some of the heavy storms that we were getting in the early spring to the summer, and of course, we've got World Cup here. So I've been able to watch a few of the matches, and very interesting seeing the athletes kind of adjust to the new climates that they're in. Very fascinating.
so true. Yeah. So, our best wishes with everyone who is facing this heat wave. Heat wave. Please take care of yourself and your family. And now, talking to the C-suite again, the heat wave of the AI-enabled exploit is coming towards you. You need to have the air conditioners of accelerated patching ready in order to secure your organization.
Aniket,
Isn't
as
that right?
always, great transition, great analogy. And everyone, thank you for joining us for another interesting episode. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Talk to you soon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in.